Brethren, happy Sabbath, especially Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom on an annual Sabbath day, this being the last day of Unleavened Bread for 2025. Now, I'm on an emergency backup computer because the main computer, I thought I had it fixed this week, but I am not a computer expert by any means, and I didn't get all the blue screens that were coming up resolved. I'm going to have to take that computer to the repairman this week. Now, why that's coming in with a big delay, I'm not quite sure, but I think if I turn down that volume, we're probably okay on this. Let me check the audio settings. I can turn off this monitor, and maybe that'll prevent that echo from coming through. Okay, good. Yeah, I think we got that. For this app, the computer this morning crashed toward the end of the morning service, so wasn't terribly critical. I was just finishing up after we played a sermon excerpt from God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong, and I have another sermon expert by him this afternoon, a short one that relates to a sermon that he gave on the last day. Oops, I didn't mean to start it just yet. That he gave on the last day of Unleavened Bread back in 1981. And it's just a 10-minute section. We're going to play that because it summarizes some things that relate to where we are today in prophecy. And then while that is playing, I noticed some of you, Karen down in Florida, came up with a link for some, nice Sabbath music from the festivals of the church. I think that's what it was. So I went and grabbed one of my videos that I'm transferring right now. It's still in progress. While Mr. Armstrong's speaking, it may finish so that we could play some of that on this last day of Unleavened Bread as we celebrate a time of the spring harvest. This Unleavened Bread teaches those called to the spring harvest that we have to labor in putting sin out of our lives, and it's not always an easy process. And sometimes God allows some things to happen in our lives, and like even in today's live stream, I wasn't expecting that computer to go out on us at the last moment there, in the last minute. But things like that can and do happen, and we take them as they come. And I see one of our levels is just a little bit out. It's not terribly out. We're coming in more on the left channel than the right channel. I think that's probably okay for the moment. But I don't have the seal. I don't have the date. I don't have a lot of things on this backup computer. I am going to load those over so that if the main computer, even after getting it fixed this week, if it ever crashes out again, we'll have a backup. We can just switch the wires and then get back on quickly. All right, we took a couple-hour break so that everybody could refresh themselves, refresh yourself for the afternoon service. This is only going to be 10 minutes. Let's go to God's end-time apostle now with a talk he gave during Unleavened Bread.
General conditions in the world.
There it is starting again without me being ready for it too. That he gave back in 1981. Here's God's end-time apostle, Herbert W. Armstrong.
General conditions in the world recently fulfilling biblical prophecy have been speeding up. They've been accelerating. And they indicate that the time is coming when God's work for this time is nearing its completion. We may be farther along and farther toward the completion of this great work. And it is a great work for so small a people as we are, that it may be nearer finished than we think or than we realize. We're coming in now on the home stretch, and we've started a program in the work this year of speeding it up. Dig in a little deeper. I haven't been asking our brethren for the past more than 2 years. I certainly haven't been high-pressuring our brethren for special offerings or contributions or anything of the kind. And yet, we have operated on a balanced budget. And I think we need to thank God for that. Now, I've said before, when we please God in the way we conduct ourselves in the church and in the work, God blesses the work. And the work speeds up, and it goes ahead, and it increases. This work did please God, and it did grow from its beginning back in 1933 until, well, for 35 years. We grew at the rate of 30% increase every year over the year before. Now, that's a very great increase for a continuous, steady increase. I don't mean precisely 30% every year. I'm sure you understand that. Some years it might have been 26, 27%, other years 34, 35. But it averaged 30%. It was close to that, right along for 35 years. And then I was away. And I was not in charge at Pasadena. I had to delegate it. And the work began to go the other way. The doctrines, the teaching of the church began to be watered down. The broadcast had been built up that we are praying hard enough. I don't think we're spending enough time with our Bible. That we are praying hard enough. I don't think we're spending enough time with our Bible. I don't think that we're close enough to God. And we need to get a lot closer to Him than we are. And if we do, you'll find this work will speed up faster than ever. I have been saying that we have to sort of tighten up our belts. We have to begin to cut down our living standards because the whole nation of the United States is going to have to cut down its living standards. There are reasons why that's going to happen to everybody in this country. And we need to put extra money now into the work of God in order that we will be reaching more and more people, and that will in time bring in more and more co-workers to help us with the financial load. But it's like pump priming. We're going to have to put some money in it now in order to cover the additional cost of new and additional television stations, of getting the plain truth out on newsstands more and more, of purchasing large space in newspapers and magazines like the Reader's Digest and the TV Guide that have 20, 30, 40 million, something like that, circulation. That many copies going out, each copy may be read by 2 or 3 people, or sometimes more, and that means reaching millions and millions of additional people. Now, out of those millions, God is going to cause some to begin contributing, and He's going to bring others into the church, and God will add to the church such as He is choosing to be saved. And that's going to come right along. So, the dynamic surge for this year has already started. The time has come now, my brethren, that we need to have a clear update on what and why is the church. And why is the church? And what is its work? And also, why is the church in its work for this time now as compared to the first century when it first started? Now, Jesus said, as you find recorded in Matthew 16, verse 18, He said, I will build my church. Now, why did He want to build a church? You know, most people just take a church for granted. I've known of churches, and I've seen churches, you know, most people think of a church as a building with a sloping roof, a steeple pointing up to heaven, and a cross on a facade, and they think the people go to the church. Actually, in the Bible, it's the church that goes to the building to meet. And so the world has it all wrong, but very few people know why Jesus started the church and why we needed a church. They just don't know there is one. Just like I myself, I've seen churches ever since I was a little boy, but it never occurred to me to wonder why there should be one. And I wonder if you ever remembered that or ever thought about it. Well, let's begin at the very beginning. Now, once again, I've mentioned this before. If I ask you, where is the beginning of everything in the Bible, the farthest back in history, you'd say Genesis 1:1, would you? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth? No, that's not the beginning. Because God didn't create the earth and the heavens that are spoken of in Genesis 1 at that time. He created those later. But the beginning is in John 1, and beginning with verse 1, in the New Testament. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, the Word is a person, just called a personage. In the Greek in which that was originally written, it is called the Logos, or he is called the Logos, a personage. But the personage means word. Logos means word or spokesman. That is the spokesman. He, the spokesman, was with God. And the spokesman was also God. Now there are two people. There's the spokesman and God. And the spokesman is God, and he's with God. So there we are. I've mentioned now my son and I could say, he's a person, I'm a person, and there are two of us, but we have the same name. We're both Armstrong. Now then, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word also is God, was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. Now over in Ephesians, the 3rd chapter, you read that God created all things by Jesus Christ. Well, now notice verse 14 right here in John 1. Verse 14, the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, became Jesus Christ. And we beheld His glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. In other words, then, Jesus, prior to His human birth, was the Word.
Okay, brethren, there's still 1 minute of the video left to go, and I guess the audio just ended for this part of the video. Now, this was only a 10-minute excerpt, and I'm actually doing a live afternoon emergency live stream after we crashed just a few minutes early from the morning service for the last day of Unleavened Bread. On this computer, I don't have the calendar, I don't have the going in and out music, I don't have the Bible display, I don't have a lot of things that we have on that regular computer that I do need to get fixed. But this excerpt, Mr. Armstrong has said some things about the church that I think brings home what we need to be focused on right now, today, on this last day of Unleavened Bread, as we're at the end of the first week of 7 weeks that we count off that must be complete before we number the morrow after the seventh Sabbath, number 50. And on that day, celebrate Pentecost and the full meaning of Pentecost. Now, it's a good thing to do while we're in the midst of counting off these 7 days to meditate as we go through the weeks of these 7 weeks of the Feast of Weeks that lead up to Pentecost, and to think about what God intended for these days, what He's doing with these days, what these days picture or symbolize. And what they picture or symbolize is what I tell a lot of people in the world when they ask me about my religion. They'll say, hey, well, tell me something about your religion. Well, I'll often let them know that my religion is part of the fall. I'm sorry, I said it backwards. I'll let them know my religion is part of the spring harvest. I sure hope God has me in the spring harvest and not the fall harvest. But then there's a lot of evidence that He does have me in the spring harvest. Now, brethren, all of us in the spring harvest, we have to continue resisting the devil and the temptations that he does and will throw at us right up until the very, very end, right up until the time we're transformed from flesh to spirit. He's still on the earth at that moment, but He's about to go, because at that moment when we're transferred from flesh to spirit, it's at the return of Jesus Christ on the first resurrection. You've seen the chart I made many times that pictures the timing of events, and at that point the timing is the beginning sound of the seventh trump of God, right at the beginning of that seventh trump. It's before Christ has the seventh angel pour out the vials, the 7 vials of the 7 last plagues. And we had that wrong for a little while because one of Mr. Armstrong's sons that went early apostate on us, unfortunately, a man with a great speaking voice, would teach that Christ doesn't come until the end of the 7 pouring out of the 7 vials. And he didn't make it a point to make that a doctrine. It's just, it seemed when you analyze it, he just wasn't paying good attention. He somehow he didn't get it. As much as he got the details on many other things, he sure missed the mark on that one. And anybody who listened to him, unfortunately, missed the mark with him if you were paying attention to that. And I did. I even, my early chart, I had the pouring out of the 7 last vials, 7 last plagues, the 7 vials of the 7 last plagues. I had that in the wrong place. I had those vials being poured out and then having Jesus Christ return. That's the way, we can just say it. That's the way GTA taught it. But one of the lay members of the church came up to me and said, that's not the way it is in the Bible. More than that, that is not the way that Mr. Herbert Armstrong taught it either. Herbert Armstrong taught it correctly. God's end-time apostle taught correctly that Christ returns, and then on that beginning sound of the 7th trump, and then as part of the 7th trump, the 7 vials of the 7 last plagues are poured out. Now, since we are transformed from flesh to spirit at Christ's return, at the beginning of that 7th trump, we are in spirit form when we see the 7th angel who comes with Christ pouring out those 7 vials of the 7 last plagues. That means those vials aren't going to hurt us, thankfully, in the spirit. And, of course, I wonder sometimes about the war that the devil had with our Father up in heaven when he went up to try to take over God's throne. Was that spiritual warfare, other than being emotionally and mentally and spiritually painful to God? Was there some, I was going to say physical hurt to it, but since God's in the spirit, can you hurt in the spirit? Well, there was a time when we can remember a time when our Father was very sad that he, as he pointed out, he was sad that he had made man. Remember, he said that he was so disappointed with man. This is just before the flood, that he was going to flood the earth and cause all men to die and say, that's it, I give up, just forget it all. But then he noticed Noah, and he gave some heed to Noah's righteousness and said, but I'm going to save this one man, his wife, and his kids, his 3 kids, and their wives. And then they're going to build an ark, spend 100 years or more building an ark that will house all the animals of the earth, and we'll put them on the ark with the people. And when these 40 days and 40 nights of rain that come and flood the entire earth, if the people that tell you that from Good Friday to Easter is 3 days and 3 nights, but it's you can get 3 days and 3 nights out of a day and a half, they would probably have had the flood, the 40 days and 40 nights of the flood only be half of they'd only had to be 20 days and 20 nights. The whole earth wouldn't have been flooded. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here for a second. But God did an entire 40 days and 40 nights of flooding the earth, destroying all life from off the face of the earth, except those that went along with Noah on the ark. And, of course, the birds that didn't need an ark, they could fly through the air the whole time during the flood. I guess that's the way it worked. Because when Noah, when the floods were, when the rains of the flooding were over and the flood waters began to settle and the ark settled on dry ground, you'll remember that Noah was sending out branches of a leaf, something with the birds, and when they came back, I I need to reread that story. When they came back with a branch of the tree, they know, okay, now the waters are settling enough that they're below tree level. And so that told Noah something about, how long it'd be before they could get off the ark. And of course, God inspired Noah to know when it's time to get off and open the doors and let all those animals back out onto the earth to reproduce on the earth. Well, Mr. Armstrong talked about the church and God having built the church, and we understand, as I was mentioning about the spring harvest, when people ask me, what about your church? Well, my church is part of the spring harvest, and you'll know more about it later. God's got you as part of the fall harvest, and I emphasize, the people not being called now, give them some the hope they should have. Let them know they're part of a greater, colossal, wonderful fall harvest of billions of people coming up in a resurrection. And, that can put a smile on their face, actually. And that God is going to save most of the world. And people that are doing evil now, Satan will be put away at that time. And don't tell them too much, because they may not be able to handle it. But watch as their eyes and see how much they're listening. And, do they ask you questions? And if they do, answer their question. Let them lead where you're going to go with it. Ask God to inspire it all. And each time, answer their question. But know where you're generally going to go with it overall if they keep asking you questions. And if God's calling them and he really directs what's going on, you can answer anything they ask you, and they may ask you a lot of detailed stuff that they really want to know. Now, they may just be curious and maybe just poking around, and if you notice that, keep your answers very short and from the Bible, like Mrs. Runcorn did with Mrs. Loma Armstrong. This is before God converted her husband, Herbert Armstrong, before he did that 6-month study to find out that people that keep the Sabbath are right, that's what God is doing after all. And that's the way the ball game works, folk. And so let me see if I've got something downloaded and ready to go. Actually, I do. I don't know how much of this I should play. There's a festival film that was good for during the regular feast days of the Feast of Tabernacles that we published, or not published, but that we produced between 1980 and 1986. The festival films, we call them. And I don't know if the link that one of our brethren from Florida gave me had some of this music in it for today or not. But it sparked an idea. Well, I have these festival films in my library, and I can bring up that in one of my video players and play some inspiring music for an afternoon service for this last great day for us. I can also just mention to you on YouTube, you can find these, all 6 years of these festival films, and listen to them. And although normally some of this music would not be regular Sabbath music, but when you consider what God is doing with the spring harvest, and how during these 7 weeks, this is what I wanted to point out to us, meditate on what God's doing with these 7 weeks. What do they picture, brethren? Do they not picture a time when God is calling a predestined small number? Well, the predestination primarily is a number, a certain small number of people, because God didn't know who all would be born at this time. Back when he'd said it's going to be a small harvest, only of so many people. Small. Now, the exact number may still be up in the air with him, exactly. But he's going to keep it small compared to what he's going to do in the later, greater, colossal fall harvest. And let me change the screen for a second, because I want to see what might be the best part of this feast film to play a little music from for this last day of Unleavened Bread, a time that In a way, brethren, it is a time to celebrate God having called you and me to be a part of that small number of people that He's called to the spring harvest. You get 1,000 extra years ahead of most of the rest of the people who'll come in later in the fall harvest at the end of the millennium, after the 1,000 years. And your eternity will have 1,000 extra years in it before those people even get resurrected and told the truth and how Jesus Christ paid the death penalty for everybody, giving His life, His perfect, pure life, unsinful life, for the sins of all the rest of us that we have committed. And that to receive that death penalty paid for us by Christ, we have to come before Him repentant, having repented of what become past sins in our life. Not sins we continue to do, but sins that are behind us and are part of our past life that God has forgiven and that we want to forget and put behind us. And as we put sin out of our lives during the days of unleavened bread, we meditate and think of, hey, God has paid the price for the death penalty price for our sins. And as we put out this sin that we have to labor to put out, we want to, even though we can start eating leavened bread again as of sunset tonight, we cannot bring sin back into our lives. The sin, the real spiritual sin that we put out, we want to keep out of our lives and keep as something that is something that we have repented of, and then look forward to a time when in the future we'll have a happy world without Satan being here. Now, Satan is pictured as being put away during the fall holiday season when, excuse me, brethren, after Christ has returned. And on the Day of Atonement, when Satan is put away, it's going to be a happy time, a very happy earth. And I'm going to play just a little bit of the which one is this? The 1980 festival film. I think this is one of the first ones that we put together. It had Big Beak, the big chicken, in it. And it just had a lot of good and happy music. Some of it's not purely Sabbath day music, per se, but it's uplifting music, and I'm going to pick a spot. We're only going to play maybe 15 minutes or so of it. And here, this might be a good spot to go in, with Renee from San Diego singing a little song here. Let's hear just a few minutes of this for this PM service of the last day of Unleavened Bread that I'm doing on an emergency computer and just doing kind of on the fly. But remember especially from this PM service what God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong said in that 10-minute excerpt we played from a sermon he gave during the Feast of Unleavened Bread back in, I think it was 1981. But here's just a few minutes of maybe about 10, maybe 15 minutes of music. We'll close out this afternoon service. Brethren, because I came in on the tail end of that, and that is a great song. This is a country that I love. It's a country we see having problems with being overrun with people migrating from other countries. And it's a country that we're going to have to give up. It's a country that's going to be in trouble, that our enemies overseas are going to form a United States of Europe, which hates the United States of America. They hate that we've been able to control their money, because our money has been the world reserve currency. And not only that, our money has been the petrodollar for the world. They hate that too, because we make money off of every barrel of oil that is sold, about 15%. It's taxed through London and our brothers in the United Kingdom. The descendants of Ephraim also makes a portion of that 15% on each barrel of oil that is sold internationally. And so Europe hates us for that, and they want their euro, and once in a while their euro takes a hold against us. And it's amazing as we watch news how the dollar will be threatened, but God says, not yet, not yet. And then you'll see something happen that turns it around. But each time the dollar gets threatened, brethren, should it not be a warning to us that what God has prophesied and what God told us through his end-time apostle that we better be ready for, that there's a time coming when our standard of living is going to suddenly drop. And in context with that, the American dollar will no longer be the reserve currency. It will no longer be the petrodollar of the world. There are several currencies already have a thing underway to make their currency become the reserve currency. The euro, that's their goal. The BRICS, B-R-I-C-S people, which has grown to be more than just B-R-I-C and S, much more than Brazil and Russia and India and China and Spain. There are many other countries have joined in that BRICS movement to make a money they create, other than the euro, the world reserve currency, to knock the dollar out of that, the Yankee dollar out of its glorious position that has caused the value of things in America to be still a blessing to Abraham, a great blessing. But that's going to go someday. And so is this nation. Suddenly, when the Great Tribulation, the fifth seal Great Tribulation begins, thankfully God offers just before that an escape for those who follow the prerequisites in Luke 21, verse 36, to be watching and praying so that you can be accounted worthy to escape all that's going to happen with the commencement of the fifth seal Great Tribulation. And so, brethren, this day, on the last day of Unleavened Bread, as we've had a whole week of putting leavening out of our homes, or having put it out of our homes if you got it all out before the feast started, and then realizing the spiritual lesson of that, how we need to put and keep real sin, spiritual sin, out of our lives. And so, taking that lesson forward and looking at prophecies that tell us to prepare to reduce our standard of living on the way to the Great Tribulation, and then continuing to watch and to pray so that we can be, as God promises, is a very worthwhile goal, to be accounted worthy to escape. And then beyond that, an even greater goal. That goal should be secondary to what God's end-time apostle said to me personally. Stephen, your number one spiritual goal, and brother, I'm sharing it with you, direct from the apostle to me to you. Our number one spiritual goal should be to want to attain to the first resurrection, being a part of the spring harvest, a much greater blessing than simply being part of the later, greater in number, but later and not as significant fall harvest. But it's still significant, because that's going to be a volume of people coming in. And when there's a lot of people, when we were one body in one church and we had Ambassador College running and had all these wonderful, talented students that you're going to hear in a moment again. I'm going to put their picture back on the screen here. Whoops, I didn't mean, hang on, y'all got to hold up till I'm ready for you. So how can I start this without that thing playing the music? Okay, I know how I can do it. We'll cut it over here, and I'll stop it. All right, I thought I had it. Music stopped. Okay, all right, but we're going to cue in from right here, and it'll fade into the song on America. What a wonderful blessing we've had here in America. That let's give God thanks for it while we still have the blessings, but we see us in trouble. And and be doing what we need to do to be accounted worthy to escape, where we can, a scattered church can be collected back together, gathered back together by Jesus Christ in oneness for 3.5 years in that place in the Middle East, protected from the beast, a place that's mentioned, by the way, in one place only in the Bible, chapter 11 of Daniel at verse 41. Verses 40 and 41 really tie together so you can see and understand it. But let's rejoice as we finish up this afternoon, last day of Unleavened Bread. Be ready, brethren, after the service today to spend a little time in prayer, giving God thanks for these blessings He's given us, for the calling to the spring harvest. And yeah, you have to suffer a few things. You're going to have some heartbreaks from time to time. Something you wanted, well, you didn't get to get it. But then look at what God has given you, the calling He's given you to the spring harvest. And yes, we have to develop spiritual muscle and be strong. And sometimes that strength requires a lot of toughness. A lot of you, brethren, who are part of the spring harvest, you personally know that from your life experience. But there's a wonderful thing ahead of us. And I hope this little bit of music can give you a heartfelt look at the glory that's coming, of the togetherness that's ahead of us. And I know these films that were made back in the 80s, how many years ago has that been? About 50 years or so. Some of you that were the youth, the young ambassadors who were part of these feast films, hey, 50 years have passed. You're now the old, senior, mature ambassadors. And you don't quite have these same youthful looks on your face per se, but you should have this youthful, exuberant, wonderful looking forward in your heart to what our Father is about to do sooner than later. Let's enjoy a few minutes of this, and then we'll sign off this last day of Unleavened Bread service, brethren. Enjoy. Shabbat Shalom. Our brother, we're going to end this service right there. And last day of Unleavened Bread. I wish you a really good rest of this Sabbath, and take a little time to thank God for blessing those of us who've been able to live in the United States. Same for you in the United Kingdom. You've had a most blessed place too, with royalty and regalness there. A little bit of a premiership among the people living in Ephraim. We had an ambassador college there at Bricket Wood. And you're in the same boat, not exactly Noah's boat, but you're in the same boat with the rest of us when it comes to the great tribulation that's coming, that God has offered an opportunity for some of us, if we're doing what God said in Luke 21:36. And I'm sorry I'm not able, with this emergency live stream system, to put the Bible display up for you, but you've seen me do that many times. You open your Bible, just to one verse, Luke 21, verse 36, and see the promise God holds out for those who will do the daily struggle, the daily effort of watching the news that relate to the first 4 active seals, and then watching that every day, and then praying without ceasing. Even while you're working, be praying for the people who are adversely affected each day by those 4 seals. You do that, and even though you won't have earned it, you will have earned an accounting, where God will account you worthy to escape. Take a look at that verse. We've got to sign off, brethren. Thank you very much for joining me here on cogtv.org, sabbath.tv, and we've got a whole week before we have the next live stream, the Friday night Bible study. So I'll get the computer in the repair shop, the main computer, and we'll be able to do our regular live stream here on cogtv.org that you can get to by typing sabbath.tv. Brother, have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks for joining me on this last day of Unleavened Bread here on cogtv.org, sabbath.tv. Until next time, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, happy Sabbath, Chag Sameach, last day of Unleavened Bread, and Shabbat Shalom.